Good morning to one and all. So in continuation of the squint class, in the last class we discussed about extraocular muscles, their actions and ocular movements. Today we'll be going through binocular single vision, amblyopia and diplopia, and if possible heterophoria. Okay. So a quick recap of your last class. There are extraocular muscles, recti and obliques. Hope you all might have studied something. And this one is a spiral of Tillot's, which I told you last time. This is the superior oblique. It has got a trochlea, which is the functional origin of the muscle. This is the nerve supply, LR6, SO4 whole thrice. Lateral rectus is by 6th nerve, superior oblique is by 4th cranial nerve, and the rest of all the extraocular muscles are by the 3rd cranial nerve. And I told you to remember this SINRAD. All the superiors are intorters, and all the recti are adductors. That thing you have to remember. So based on that, you can get this table. And I told you insertion in front of the equator and behind the equator, showing the pen, the example, how it works. And these are the movements, ocular movements, ductions, uniocular movements. These are versions, binocular movements, which they will ask you in your Viva exams. And then there are vergences, convergence and divergence, encyclovergence, excyclovergence, and positive and negative vertical vergences. So that was about the last class. So now today we are going to discuss a little more, few more concepts about squint. So the first thing you have to know about is the types of muscles. So the extraocular muscles, based on their action, they are classified into various types. Okay. So first one is, here it is not written. Actually, first one is agonist. 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 Agonist means the prime mover. Prime mover of the eyeball is known as an agonist. So for example, if you want the right eye to look towards the right side, so the agonist will be right lateral rectus muscle. So if the right eye has to look towards the right side, the agonist or the prime mover will be the right lateral rectus muscle. That is about the agonist. And then you have got the concept of synergist. So what is a synergist? So two muscles which serve the same purpose. Like for example, if you take the right eye, the superior rectus causes elevation and the inferior oblique also causes elevation. So synergists are a pair of muscles in the same eye which have got the same action. For example, superior rectus in the right eye causes elevation. Similarly, inferior oblique in the right eye also causes elevation. That is about synergist. Now, what is antagonist? Antagonist is muscles with opposite action. For example, you take the right eye, the medial rectus causes inward movement, lateral rectus causes outwards movement. So, medial rectus and lateral rectus in the same eye are antagonists to one another. So, antagonist is two muscles in the same eye with the opposite actions. Example, medial rectus and lateral rectus in the same eye. Next is yoke muscle. This is nothing but a contralateral synergist. For example, if you take the right eye and if you take the left eye, so in right eye, suppose there is one muscle causing elevation, and in left eye there is some other muscle causing elevation. Those two muscles will become synergist. Or to make it clear, yoke muscles are also known as contralateral synergist. So synergist means two muscles having the same action in the same eye. So yoke muscle means it is a contralateral synergist. For example, if you want levoversion, suppose the eyes have to look towards the left. So the left lateral rectus should contract first. The left lateral rectus will contract, your left eye will move towards the left side, and your right medial rectus will contract, your right eye will also move towards the right side. Okay. So yoke muscles are contralateral synergist. Contralateral synergist means two muscles present in each eye, that is one in the right eye, the other in the left eye, which serve the same function. So two muscles serving the same function. For example, if you take this right eye and the left eye, so the right eye medial rectus and the left eye lateral rectus, both will cause the eyes to deviate towards the same side. That's why they are called as yoke muscles. And then contralateral antagonist. This is the muscles with opposite action. For example, right eye lateral rectus and left eye lateral rectus, you see. Right lateral rectus causes a right side movement of the right eye, and left lateral rectus causes left side movement of the left eye. So both are moving in the opposite direction. So that is a contralateral antagonist. Right lateral rectus and left lateral rectus, for example. So here in this example, you see. So if you take yoke muscles, So in this condition, if you see, or if this condition, suppose this is the right side of the patient. So the right eye is looking towards the right side and left eye is looking towards the right side. So here right lateral rectus and left medial rectus are contracting. Right lateral rectus and left medial rectus are contracting to cause dextroversion. So right lateral rectus and left medial rectus will become the yoke muscles here. So what are the contralateral antagonists? The right lateral rectus and the left lateral rectus. They will become the contralateral antagonists because they cause opposite direction of movements. Hope you all understood. So yoke muscles are two muscles, one in each eye, one in the right eye and one in the left eye, which cause the same direction of movement. For example, in dextroversion, if you see this example in dextroversion, both eyes have to look towards the right side. So the right lateral rectus contracts and the left medial rectus contracts so that both eyes look towards the right side. So these are called yoke muscles. Okay. So what is the goal of these extraocular muscles? So we have discussed so much about this origin, insertion, so many functions, primary action, secondary action, tertiary action. So what is the goal? Ultimately, to maintain a binocular single vision. So maintaining a single object on both the fovea. So the fovea centralis or the macula lutea, which is known as the yellow spot, is the portion of maximum visual acuity. I told it to you in the last class. So fovea centralis is the one which perceives the finest detail and has the greatest visual acuity. So on both the fovea, that is on the fovea of the right eye as well as the left eye, you should have the same object or same image so that the brain can interpret it easily. Suppose your right eye is looking at a door and your left eye is looking at a window, then the brain gets confused as to which one is the image it has to process. So when there are binocular single vision, it means that both eyes should be focusing only on a single object. Only then it is called binocular single vision. And the goal of this extraocular muscles is to maintain this binocular single vision. That is, both the eyes should focus on the same object. For example, if you are looking at a door, even the right eye and the left eye, both should be focusing at the door. If you are looking at a window or you are looking at a monitor screen or you are looking at your mobiles, both your eyes should look at the same object. Only then it will be clear, or else it will cause double vision or confusion, which we'll discuss in the succeeding slides. So to maintain this binocular single vision, there are few laws governing the ocular motility, which can be a 2 marks question. So this you might have also read it in your physiology of your first year. So Herring's law of equal innervation. So here what I told you about yoke muscles. So yoke muscles is two muscles, one from each eye, causing the same movement. For example, in right eye lateral rectus and left eye medial rectus, both will cause the deviation towards the same direction. So right lateral rectus and left medial rectus will cause movement in the same direction. So what will happen is both the right lateral rectus and left medial rectus both should contract simultaneously at a time with an equal intensity. Only then the binocular single vision can be maintained. So Herring's law states that equal and simultaneous innervation goes to the yoke muscles. For example, the right lateral rectus and left medial rectus, if they are present, so both should receive the equal amount of impulse and at the same time, so that both of them contract together at the same time, thereby causing the shifting movement of both the eyes towards the right side, so that the object can be maintained, stable fixation can be maintained of the fovea. That is about Herring's law. So the next one is Sherrington's law. So it states that increased flow to the contracting muscle causes decreased flow to the relaxing muscle. Sorry for the typing mistake. So increased flow to the contracting muscle. So suppose your right eye has to look towards the right side. So what should contract here is in the right eye, the right lateral rectus muscle should contract so that your right eye will turn outside. So when the right lateral rectus is contracting, immediately the medial rectus of the right eye should be relaxing, or else there won't be any movement. So Sherrington's law states that when there is impulse or innervation going on to the agonist, for example, right lateral rectus, it is getting an impulse, then the impulse towards the right medial rectus should be stopped. Only then the movement of the eyeball will take place. If suppose both these muscles, the right lateral rectus and right medial rectus, are contracting at the same time, eye doesn't move, it remains fixed. Only if the right lateral rectus is contracting, the eye will move towards the right side. And only if the left medial rectus is relaxing only, it can move. If this left medial rectus is also contracting, then what happens is there will be no movement of the eye. That is what Sherrington's law states. The next is Donder's law. It states that at each position of the eyeball, there exists a particular coordinates of space. This I'll explain you in a diagram. And Listing's law states that there is no real torsion or cyclorotation of the eyeball. So these two laws we'll see in this diagram. So see, you all might have read in your intermediate or your 10th the graphs. This is the x-axis and what you draw vertically is the y-axis in a two-dimensional plane, and still the three-dimensional plane is the z-axis. So the eye is a three-dimensional structure. So it has got an x-axis, it has got a y-axis, and it has got a z-axis. So here, the center of rotation of the eyeball, the geometric center of rotation of the eyeball lies at the point of intersection of all these x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. That is at the point of 0. So you might have all read in your 10th standard that you have got some values for this x-axis, like -1, -2, -3, +1, +2. For y-axis also, similarly, you get +1, +2, -1, -2, and for z-axis also. So at any particular position of the eyeball has got a particular value in space, coordinates. So there are some x value, there is some y value, and there is some z value. So that is known as Donder's law. So Donder's law states that at each position of the eyeball, there exists a particular coordinates of space. That is, suppose when the eye is looking at a straight gaze. So the optical axis of the eye has some particular x value, some particular y value, and some particular z value. Suppose the eye is looking upwards. Again, the optical axis changes its direction, and it has got some x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis value. So the Donder's law states that at each position, the eyeball, it has got some specific coordinates of space in x, y, and z axis. That is Donder's law. And then this plane is known as Listing's plane. This plane is called Listing's plane, around which the rotatory movements of the eyeball take place. That is called as the Listing's plane. And then the Listing's law. The Listing's law states that there is no real torsion of the eyeball, but there is only a gradual shift from primary position to tertiary position of gaze. That is a little confusing for your level. You just remember that Listing's law. There is a law called as Listing's law. So there is no real torsion, but when the eyeball changes from primary gaze to some secondary or tertiary gaze, it goes as a pattern. So that is a little difficult, and for purpose of PG. So you just remember that Listing's law, some law is present. Okay. So Herring's law, equal innervation. Sherrington's law is antagonist. That is when agonist is contracting, antagonist is relaxing. Donder's law, at each position of space, there are particular coordinates. And Listing's law states that there is no real cyclotorsion, but there is only shifting from one position to another position. That is from primary position to tertiary position. Primary position is orthophoria, tertiary position is dextro-elevation, levo-elevation, dextro-depression, levo-depression, etc. Okay. And then position of gaze. So primary gaze, it is also known as orthophoria. Ortho means straight. So phoria, something related to eyeball. So orthophoria, eyeballs are looking straight. That is the primary gaze. And then secondary. Secondary gazes are straight gazes, either vertical or horizontal. That is elevation, depression, dextroversion, and levoversion. They are the secondary gazes. And tertiary gazes are a combination of horizontal and vertical. And then cardinal gazes. So here, if I explain this diagram, so this is the primary gaze. Orthophoria, both eyes are looking straight. So primary gaze is both eyes are looking straight. This is primary gaze. Now, what is secondary gaze? Secondary gaze means either vertical or horizontal. Vertical is this one, either elevation or depression, or dextrorotation, or dextroversion or levoversion. So these will be your secondary gazes. So primary gaze is orthophoria, both eyeballs are looking straight. That is primary gaze. Secondary gaze is either one direction movements, either vertical or horizontal. So either straight looking up, elevation or depression, dextroversion or levoversion. These will be the secondary position of gazes. And then the tertiary position. Tertiary position include a combination of both horizontal and vertical. So these are the tertiary positions of gazes. That is dextro-elevation, dextro-depression, levo-elevation, and levo-depression. So these are a combination of both horizontal and vertical gazes. See, here in dextro-depression, what happens? First, the eyeball has to look towards the right side. That is a horizontal movement. Then again, it has to undergo depression. That is a vertical movement. So a combination of horizontal and vertical movements is known as a tertiary position of gaze. For example, dextro-depression, dextro-elevation, levo-elevation, levo-depression. These are the tertiary positions of gazes. So primary gaze is orthophoria, both eyes looking straight. Secondary gazes are straight movements, either vertical or horizontal. So vertical is this one, elevation, depression. Horizontal is these two, dextroversion, levoversion. They are horizontal movements. Okay. And then tertiary position is a combination of horizontal and vertical. So what is that? Either dextro-elevation, dextro-depression, levo-elevation, levo-depression. These are the tertiary positions of gazes. These are called tertiary positions because they involve both horizontal and vertical movement. For example, if you take dextro-elevation, the eyeball should first initially rotate towards the right side and then they should get elevated. So as two movements are included, they are known as tertiary positions of gazes. And then there is a concept called cardinal positions. So what is the actual literary meaning of cardinal is, cardinal means important. So anything which is very important is known as cardinal. So very important thing is cardinal. So what are these cardinal positions of gases and why is it so important? It is so important because it allows examination of each muscle independently. Again, we'll come to the diagram. So see, cardinal position gases are 6 in number. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is dextro elevation, dextroversion, dextrodepression, levo elevation, levoversion, and levodepression. So these are the things which are called the cardinal positions of gases. So cardinal positions of gases are 6 in number. They are this one: right side top dextro elevation, left side top levo elevation, right side dextroversion, left side levoversion, right side down dextrodepression, and left side down levodepression. So these 6, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. So these are called the cardinal positions of gases. So I told you cardinal means they are very important. Okay, so cardinal are very important. So why it is very important is, here you can examine each and every muscle independently. So what is it is, suppose here you see, if we take this dextroversion, suppose this dextroversion you take, or suppose this one you take dextroversion, anything, because right and left it is confusing. For me it is right and for you it is left, and the computer is showing laterally inverted image. So here you see, suppose you think this is dextro elevation and this is the patient's right side on this side. So see, the right eye is looking towards the right side, left eye is also looking towards the right side. So this is dextroversion. In dextroversion, both eyes are looking towards the right side. So right eye is looking towards the right, left eye is also looking towards the right eye, towards the right side. So in right eye, what is the muscle functioning? It is lateral rectus. In left eye, the muscle contracting here is medial rectus. Suppose there is some paralysis of the lateral rectus in the right eye. Suppose I say the patient has got some neurological disease or some cerebral brainstem infarct or something he has got, and then suppose on dextroversion, the right eye is not totally rotating towards the right side. So in dextroversion, when the right eye is not totally rotating towards the right side, that means there is a paralysis of the lateral rectus muscle of the right eye. Okay. Similarly, if suppose on dextroversion, the left eye is not totally rotating towards the right side. Suppose in dextroversion, when the left eye is not moving, that means here the muscle which should function is the medial rectus muscle in the left eye. But if this eye is not moving, suppose it is straight, it is not moving, that means left medial rectus is paralyzed. So here you can independently pinpoint to which muscle the lesion is there. So which muscle is paralyzed, whether it is lateral rectus or medial rectus. So each and every muscle you can diagnose based on this cardinal position of gaze. So cardinal means anything which is important. Why it is important? Because we can diagnose exactly which muscle has got a pathology or which muscle is weak or which muscle has a paralysis. Suppose in dextroversion, right eye is not moving, it is right lateral rectus palsy. Suppose in dextroversion, right medial rectus is not, left eye is not moving, that means medial rectus muscle in this eye is paralytic. So that is how you can pinpoint the diagnosis. Based on that, you can identify what could be the disease. Similarly, in this dextro elevation, what happens is, so for the right eye, superior rectus muscle contracts for dextro elevation. Similarly, left eye, inferior oblique muscle contracts. So suppose in dextro elevation, right eye is not moving upwards, superior rectus is paratic. Suppose in dextro elevation, the left eye is not moving upwards, that means inferior oblique muscle is paralytic. Similarly, in dextrodepression, if right eye is not moving down, inferior rectus in the right eye is paratic. Similarly, in dextrodepression, if left eye is not moving down, superior oblique muscle is of the left eye is paratic. So this is all a little confusing. Anyhow, this PowerPoint is recorded for you. So just this slide you see once again. Here the exact muscle is given. Superior rectus and inferior oblique, which muscle acts in which eye, in which particular case, that is given here. So if you see it once, you'll understand. And similarly, so now you can get a doubt. So why is this elevation and depression not taken as a cardinal gases? Because I told you already, the recti muscle causes 60% of elevation and oblique muscle causes the 40% of elevation. So suppose in elevation, superior rectus and inferior oblique muscle both act together. So here we can't say which muscle is paralyzed. Either if the right eye is not, if this eye is not elevating, we don't know whether the superior rectus is paralyzed or inferior oblique is paralyzed. Similarly, in depression also, two muscles cause this action. One is the inferior rectus muscle of the eye and the other one is the superior oblique muscle of the eye. So suppose this eye is not moving down, it is not getting depressed. So here we find it difficult to pinpoint the diagnosis to which one is there, because inferior rectus and superior oblique, both of them cause depressing movement of the eyeball. So here we are in a confusion as to which muscle is paralyzed. So that's why these two gazes are not included in the cardinal position of gazes. Similar, but here if you take in this position, you have only one muscle doing that action. So that's why you can exactly pinpoint the diagnosis. That's why they are called cardinal position of gazes. Hope you are clear. Once revise this PPT in your videos, it will be okay. See, elevation and depression. 60% of the elevation or depression is done by the rectus muscle and 40% is done by the oblique muscle. So here, rectus causes 60% and oblique causes 40%. That's the reason an elevation and depression are not included in the cardinal positions of gazes. Okay. So this is again the same diagram. That one what it showed you, it has the in each eye, it is for independence. This is the right eye, this is the left eye. So this is a little confusing. You better follow this diagram only. This chart here, it is very clear which muscle in which case. So that was about a little about the extraocular movements. So next we'll go to supranuclear control of eye movements. So basically, this diagram you see. So here the cerebral cortex. So usually in your physiology, you might have learned the Broca's area, Wernicke's area. So there are all different areas are present. Okay. So similarly, you have got a precentral gyrus and a central gyrus, and then the post-central area, and all these areas are present. Okay. So you have the motor muscles, all the motor activities present in the cortex area. That is in the precentral gyrus. I think in the precentral gyrus, you have all these cortical centers for the extra of the muscles, skeletal muscles. So here there is a cortical center in the cerebral cortex. So from the cerebral cortex, the neurons go to the cranial nerve nuclei. CNN means cranial nerve nuclei. So this cranial nerve nuclei are located in the pons and the brainstem. There is the midbrain, pons, and medulla. This is the location of the cranial nerve nuclei. You have all the 12 pairs of cranial nerve nuclei located in the midbrain, pons, and medulla. That is in the brainstem. So from the cerebral cortex, the impulses goes to the cranial nerve nuclei located in the brainstem. From the cranial nerve nuclei through the nerves, that is from the fourth nerve, third nerve, and the sixth nerve, the impulses come to the muscles, that is the extraocular muscles. I told you LR6, SO4, whole thrice. Lateral rectus is supplied by the abducens nerve, superior oblique is supplied by the trochlear nerve, and the rest of the extraocular muscles are supplied by the oculomotor nerve. So from the precentral gyrus, and here it is little difficult. Here precentral gyrus and even prefrontal gyrus and many cortical areas come into action in supranuclear movement. It is a very big topic. So there are different areas like frontal eye field, superior dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, etc. There are many areas. It is not required for your level. So there are many centers in the cerebral cortex from which the impulses pass to the cranial nerve nuclei. That is the third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerve nuclei, which are located in the brainstem. And from the brainstem nuclei, in the form of nerves, that is the third nerve, fourth nerve, and the sixth cranial nerve, the impulses go to the extraocular muscles, respective muscles. So the path from the cerebral cortex up to the cranial nerve nuclei, that is the brainstem, it is known as the supranuclear pathway. And then the path from the cranial nerve nuclei to the muscles is known as an infranuclear pathway. So this is the system. So infranuclear pathway consists of your nerves, third nerve, fourth nerve, and the sixth cranial nerves. Whereas the supranuclear pathway consists of this various various radiations will be there. That is not required at your level. So what are the various supranuclear eye movements? Just remember the names: saccades, pursuits, vergences. Vergences I already told you, convergence, divergence, and all. Fixation. Fixation is nothing but your orthophoria. And an optokinetic system and vestibulo-ocular system. Vestibulo-ocular system is, it will be dealt in your ENT, cows. Cold eyes opposite side and warm water caused to the same side, nystagmus. So that is the vestibulo-ocular system. Optokinetic system, fixation, vergence, pursuit, and saccades. Saccades are nothing but quick movements. Suppose you are looking at your computer screen and someone comes and calls you. Your parents or someone calls and knocks at the door of your room. So suddenly you look at the door. So that is a saccade. So saccade is sudden rapid shifting movement of the eye is known as a saccade. You are looking at an object, suddenly someone comes and you look at that second object, that is a saccade, which is a rapid movement. And then pursuit is a slow movement. Suppose you are going in a train, you are traveling in a train and you are seeing a tree or you are looking at the moon from the train. So you are seeing that the moon is also moving along with your train. So that is a pursuit system. Or else, for example, you are sitting in your train and surrounding beside your railway track, there is a road and there is a car traveling on the road. So from your train, you go on observing that particular car, how it is moving. So that is a pursuit movement. Or else you sit in your home and there is some video is going on on your screen. Like suppose in your TV news, the scrolling will be going on under the news. So you are seeing at that scrolling. So to read that exactly, you should use pursuit movement. Pursuit movement is slow following movement of the eyeball. That is, suppose an object is constantly moving in the visual field and you're focusing at that object, that is known as pursuit system. Okay. So next, coming to binocular single vision. So what is this binocular single vision? So I told you, though there are two eyes, we are having two eyes, both are seeing separately. Though the image is formed on the fovea of the two eyes separately, we see only a single image. So your right eye has one image and your left eye has an image. Though it is the same image, though there are two eyes, we appreciate only one particular image, which is because of the processing done by the brain, occipital cortex. So that is the cause for your binocular single vision. Lower animals and birds have only monocular vision. So what is this? We'll see. So here you see, this is some goat, suppose you think. So in this goat or cow or crow, whatever you see one eye is looking towards the right side and the other eye is looking towards the left side. So this eye sees only the structures which are present on the right side, and this eye sees the structures which are present only to the left side. Only a small area in their visual field, here they overlap, where they can see with the both eyes. Only a little area is present. So here what happens is one eye is suppressed and the goat only sees with one eye sometimes. And sometimes this eye is suppressed and the goat sees with the other eye. So in lower animals, what happens is the binocular single vision is very limited amount. So this is the entire visual field of this goat, but only in this little part, both the two eyes are having a same image or seeing the same visual field. So the rest of the maximum part, only one eye is seeing one field and one eye is seeing one field. Suppose this side there is a tiger and this side there is a cow. This goat will be seeing only either this tiger or this cow. It becomes very difficult for its brain to process. That's why these animals can be hunted very easily. So the lower animals, why they become predators, why they will get predated easily is their binocular single vision is not so good and the depth perception is not so good. Unless you have binocular single vision, you can't appreciate the three-dimensional structure of any object. So because the lower animals, one eye sees one thing and the other eye sees something. Suppose this eye is actively present and this eye is suppressed, and this side there is some lion or tiger, it will easily come and jump on this animal and kill it. So in lower animals, what happens is this binocular single vision is present only to a limited extent, small area. That's why the visual acuity is not so clear. The depth perception is there, but it is not as much developed as higher animals like us. That's why they get easily hunted upon. Similarly, if you take the case of a tiger or a lion or human beings, if you see, here you see both eyes are looking straight. So this right eye has got so much of visual field, left eye has got so much of visual field, but the amount of binocular field is improved here. So compared to this goat, you see only a small triangle of area, it has got depth perception, but this tiger has got a greater visual field and is seeing a large amount of space with both the eyes together. So that's why what happens is it has a good amount of depth perception and calculation. That's why these cheetahs, tigers, lions are all able to jump so easily for long distances. So they jump in leaps and bounds. So here the binocular single vision is more for these animals and even for humans. That's why we appreciate every minutest detail very clearly. So for stereopsis, or stereopsis is nothing but a three-dimensional video. So if you want to appreciate the three-dimensional structure, you should have a good amount of binocular single vision. That is this part. That's why these animals are good hunters, and these animals become easily prey to these animals which have a binocular single vision. So how does this development takes place of binocular single vision? It starts within the first 6 months of age. So you remember the time 6. 6 months to 6 years of age is known as the critical period of vision. 6 months to 6 years. So the 6 and 6, 6 months to 6 years, it is known as the critical period for development of vision. So it is completed in few years of life. That is nearly 6 years. 6 months. At 6 months of age, you get macular stereopsis. Macula is nothing but a fovea centralis, where you have a good depth perception that is developed by 6 months of age. And by the age of 6 years, full visual acuity and binocular single vision develops. That's why small children, sometimes they always throw the objects. They're unable to grasp an object correctly, or they are unable to draw the diagrams and all clearly because they don't have a good depth perception. By the age of 6 months, the baby doesn't have stereopsis at all, or it has very less amount. By the age of 6 months minimum, he doesn't have good stereopsis or depth perception. By the age of 6 years, it will be completely in there. So what is the need? So to have this binocular single vision, what all you have to have? You should have a straight eyes, you should have clear optical media, you should have a functional visual cortex. So see. So if you want to have this good binocular single vision, both your eyes should be looking straight. If one eye has got a squint and it is deviating one side, you won't have binocular vision. So both eyes should be looking straight. There should not be any organic pathology like cataracts or corneal opacity, so that the vision is completely falling on the eyeball. And your brain should be good and activated to process the images of both eyes. So both eyes should be looking straight. The optical media should be clear without any cataracts, corneal opacities, or retina problems, etc. And your brain should be functioning well, and it should be able to integrate the impulses between both the eyes. So that is about this binocular single vision. And this grades of binocular single vision, that is a 4 marks question for you. So what are the grades of binocular single vision? First one is simultaneous perception. Second one is fusion. Third one is stereopsis. So what are these? Simultaneous perception is, I'll explain in this diagram. See, suppose your right eye is seeing a lion and left eye is seeing a cage. Suppose your right eye is seeing a lion and your left eye is seeing a cage. When both these impulses are produced to the brain imagines that there is a lion in the cage. So simultaneous perception is when two dissimilar objects, as an example like a lion and a cage, are projected to the eye. So that is, lion is shown to the right eye and the cage is shown to the left eye. And then if those impulses go to the brain imagines as if both the objects are combined together. That is, the lion is in the cage. So these should be agonistic pictures, not antagonistic pictures. Suppose here there is a lion and cage. That's why your brain interprets that there is a lion inside the cage. Suppose here one eye you show a lion and in the other eye you show a tiger. Then what happens is your brain gets confused because one eye is seeing a lion and the other eye is seeing a tiger. So there your brain can't infer which one is which one. So it will get a confusion. So that's why if two not mutually antagonistic pictures, that is something which have some relation, the two pictures should be related to one another. For example, lion and a cage, or a bird and a cage, which is given in your textbook. So one eye is shown a lion and the other eye is shown a cage. The brain interprets that there is a lion inside the cage. So there are two pictures which are different, but they have some relation between both of them. That is simultaneous perception. Next, the second grade is fusion. What is this fusion is, suppose two pictures of the same picture but which are incomplete are projected to both the eyes. For example, here there is a rabbit. It has got one ear here. In this other picture, there is other eye. Here the tail is present, here the tail is absent. Here the bouquet is absent, here the bouquet is present. So if same picture which is incomplete, so one part of the picture has some parts and the other picture has got some parts, but both are the images of the same picture. So if this is shown to the right eye and this is shown to the left eye, then both of them are interpreted to the brain to be one single image, as if a rabbit with a tail and holding a bouquet with two ears. That is what you infer, the brain infers. So fusion second grade is ability of the two eyes to produce a composite picture formed from two similar images. There are two similar images. Both are images of rabbit, but both are incomplete images. So this image is shown to right eye, this image is shown to left eye. Then your brain interprets that both of these are a single image, a rabbit with two ears, one tail, and one bouquet. That is fusion or second grade. And then stereopsis. Stereopsis is what I told you, that is 3 dimension. So 3 dimension is nothing but when you see a same object at two different angles, that is, you get a depth perception. So here we will see, suppose you are seeing this diagram. This is a 2-dimensional image. So here what you are able to make out, it is only a rectangle. So this is a rectangle or square, whatever you take it. It is looking like a square. Suppose it is looking like a square, it is only a 2-dimensional image. Now if I see this from a different angle, see, suppose if I see it from a different angle. So now how is it looking? It is looking like a 3-dimensional image. This is stereopsis. So stereopsis is nothing but your 3-dimensional perception. So what is this 3 dimension is? Suppose if you are looking at an object, suppose these are 2 lines, a rectangle, you are joining 4 lines here. This is 1 line, this is 1 line, this is 1 line, and this is 1 line. You are joining all these 4. What you are saying, it is just a rectangle. If you draw it on a piece of paper, you see only a 2-dimensional object. Now suppose you draw it in a different way. Or if you see this object from a different angle, suppose you are sitting in front of suppose you think this is a box. If you are seeing the box from the front, you will be seeing only this 2-dimensional image. Suppose if you look at the box from the side angle, then what will happen is you'll be seeing a 3-dimensional image. So this is how it appears, just like a box. So this is stereopsis. So stereopsis is ability to obtain an impression of depth or a 3-dimensional structure you are able to obtain. How? It is by superimposition of 2 pictures taken from a slightly different angles. So for this box, if I take a photograph from the straight or front part, I'll be seeing only this rectangle. So if I take a photograph from the side angle, I'll be able to make out this 3-dimensional image. So this is stereopsis. So that is the concept. And you read the textbook and make your own sentences to how to write this. I told you about the concept of this. So simultaneous perception, 2 dissimilar images, but which are having some relation. Lion and a cage both come together. And second grade fusion is 2 same images, but which are incomplete. Both together are fused to a complete image. And stereopsis is one is taken from a different angle to get a 3-dimensional impression. So this one you frame into your own sentences while writing in your exam. So is the internet connection okay for you? Here it is showing connection is unstable. Okay, now it is okay. So what are the various abnormalities of this binocular single vision? So there are abnormalities. So suppression, amblyopia, abnormal retinal correspondence, confusion, and diplopia. So here, this amblyopia and diplopia, there will be 2 marks questions for you. Amblyopia and diplopia, there are 2 marks questions for you. So first one is suppression. So suppression I told you in the goat example. Temporary active cortical inhibition of the image in the squinting eye. So in that goat example, if you take, so suppression means, so here suppose this eye is looking towards this side. So this eye will be suppressed because if both eyes are looking at two different objects, the brain will get confused to process which image. Suppose this eye is seeing a river and this eye is seeing a tree. The brain will get confused to process which image. That's why one eye will be suppressed. That is known as suppression. Suppression means active cortical inhibition. So usually it is seen in case of squint. This one I told you because it is easy to understand. Suppose in squint what happens is both the eyes are looking straight. So suppose imagine this eye is looking straight and this eye has got a squint and it has deviated to this side towards the right or the left. Then what happens is this eye will be seeing only this part. This eye will be seeing this part. Then what will happen is the brain will get confused. It will see two images and different images. It will get confused. So to prevent that, there is a phenomena adopted by the brain which is known as suppression. So in suppression, it is an active cortical inhibition of the image in the squinting eye. It prevents diplopia or double vision. It is active only in binocular vision. Only when the binocular vision is present only it is active. Suppose one eye is totally blind and it is squinting, then there is no suppression because the eye is already blind. So there is no need of suppression because it is a blind eye, the brain need not inhibit it. Only binocular vision, that is only if both eyes are functioning and both eyes are seeing two different images. In that cases, to avoid double vision and to avoid confusion, suppression comes. So how to test this suppression, suppression or this binocular vision or diplopia is by Watts 4-dot test or with the Synopta 4. So that is about suppression. So you leave about suppression. This amblyopia is very important for you. It is asked as a 2 marks question. So what is this amblyopia? It is also known as lazy eye. So the eye is lazy. So suppose most of you might have seen. Suppose there is a fracture. Someone of your friends or someone you know has suffered from a fracture. So suppose his wrist joint or suppose his hand got a fracture. Suppose one person got a fracture. What you do? You apply a POP cast. And for 6 weeks, you ask him to take absolute rest. There should not be any movement of the hand. So suppose there is a fracture of the limb and you apply a POP cast and for 6 weeks, you ask him to keep it in that position only. You don't move it because the bone won't heal or the bone won't form a callus and it won't heal together. So what happens is at the end of 6 weeks, when you completely stop using this limb, it becomes very difficult to perform the movements. So because if for a long duration of time, any organ of your body is left disused, it goes into disuse atrophy. You might have read in your pathology, atrophy, dystrophy, and all these things. So any organ, if it is not used, not put into use for a long period of time, it goes into atrophy. And so that it becomes lazy and you will not be able to move that limb unless you get a physiotherapy, unless you go for a physiotherapy. So the same thing applies for the eye also. So till the time your eye is seeing some objects, your eye will be functioning. But once your eye is blind due to some reason, suppose there is a cataract or suppose there is some corneal opacity, there is no light coming into your eye or your eye is not able to see anything. In that case, what happens is your eye becomes lazy. Lazy in the sense, there is some unknown mechanism by which your retina and your nervous system, they will not be able to process the image impulse later. So amblyopia is partial loss of vision in one or both the eyes. In one or both the eyes, there's a partial loss of vision. Suppose the visual acuity should be 6/6. It will not be 6/6. It will be some 6/60 or 6/36 in that particular eye. And in the absence of any organic pathology, in the absence of organic disease. So suppose the cornea is clear, retina is good, everything is good, but still there is no refractive error also, but still his eye vision is not there, either in one eye or both eye, or his vision is reduced. Then that is because of amblyopia. Amblyopia, the mechanism is not clearly understood, but it is thought that it is because of some neurological problem. There is some neurological problem in that nervous system or the brain or the occipital cortex, and we don't know the exact reason. There is no organic disease. So here we don't know what the exact cause is. So in the absence of any organic disease, so if you take an MRI brain, the brain will be normal, the optic nerve will be normal, orbit will be normal, and your retina will be normal, everything will be normal. So in the absence of organic disease, but the vision will not be improving. This is known as amblyopia or lazy eye. So why this occurs? I told you the critical period of development of vision is from birth to 6 years of age. So 6 months to 6 years. I told you to remember 6 and 6. So 6 months to 6 years is your critical period of vision development. So any damage. So more sensitive period is the first 6 months of life. First 6 months of life is the most sensitive part for development of vision. So in this first 6 months to 6 years of age, if there is some pathology which is causing the eye to not function properly. Suppose the eye is not able to see properly because of squint. Because in squint, what happens, I told you, there is suppression. So suppose one eye is looking towards the right side and the other eye is looking straight. So what the brain does is, in order to avoid confusion, it suppresses one eye. One eye will not be functioning. So that is an active cortical inhibition. So that is called strabismic type of amblyopia because of squint, because of strabismus. The brain causes suppression of image in one eye. That is known as strabismic amblyopia. Next one is stimulus deprivation amblyopia. Suppose a baby is born with a cataract. Suppose there is a congenital cataract. A baby is born with a cataract. You have to do surgery for him as soon as possible. If possible, within the first 6 weeks of life. I told you to remember 6. So 6 weeks, 6 months, and 6 years are the critical period of development of vision. So if suppose the baby is born with cataract and you examine the baby immediately after delivery, you see that the baby has got a cataract. Try to operate on this eye as quickly as possible. If the best results are obtained, if you operate within the age of 6 weeks after the baby is born, because by the age of 6 weeks or before the age of 6 months, if you do not operate for the cataract, after 6 months, if you operate for the cataract and implant an IOL also, there will be some amblyopia. The eye will not regain its full vision because this is the time when the eye is maturing. So all the nervous system, the tracts and the axons and neurotransmitters, everything are developing during the period of first 6 years of life. So in this time, suppose there is some cataract or there is some ptosis and the visual light is not reaching. Even if you surgically correct also, even if you correct this cataract by surgery also, the vision won't be full 6/6. So then we call it as amblyopia. Similarly, anisometropia. Suppose there is a refractive error. So there is a refractive error. Suppose one eye has got -1 power and the other eye has got -3 power. So then what happens is one eye goes into suppression because double image will be formed. There will be diplopia and confusion will be there. And then so anisometropia will be there. So this anisometropia, isometropia, they'll be teaching you in detail in your refractive errors class. So basically to remember, suppose there is some squint. Try to operate within 6 weeks of life. Suppose there is a cataract. Operate within 6 weeks of birth. If there is a ptosis since birth, try to operate within 6 weeks of life. Similarly, if there is anisometropia, there is refractive error. Try to correct as and when possible. Suppose you think that that baby is not looking at your mother, not identifying, immediately take him to a ophthalmologist. They'll dilate and they'll do a refraction and they'll see if there is any refractive error. Even for small children also, we can use spectacles. There is no wrong in that. If you don't use spectacles, the eye will go into amblyopia. After the age of 6 years, how much correction you'll give also, that amblyopia will not be improving. So anisometropia means difference between the refractive errors of both the eyes. So mostly it is different for different. For myopia, up to 4 diopter they say. For hypermetropia, it is 2 diopters. So anisometropia is nothing but, suppose you have -1 in one eye and -6 in other eye. Then what happens is you'll be seeing 2 images. So that is known as anisometropia. So that is known as amblyopia. And there is a thing called crowding phenomena. Crowding phenomena is nothing but, suppose there is an amblyopia. So for an amblyopia patient, if you show this Snellen's chart, he will not be able to identify these letters because there are so many things here. The eye is very lazy. The eye is unable to process so many vision signals at a time. Suppose the eye has to process that this is T, this is O, this is Z, this is F, this is P. All these letters the eye has to identify. So amblyopia, the eye is already lazy. So it can't identify these many structures, these many alphabets. That's why the visual acuity will be less for the patient when you project this Snellen's chart to the patient of an amblyopia. But if you project these charts independently, suppose independently that E or O individual letters, if you show to that patient, the patient will be easily able to process because the eye is lazy. The eye, when you project so many images at a time, it can't process because it is lazy. But if you take one particular letter and if you show it, the eye will be able to identify it. So that is one mode of diagnosing amblyopia. This is known as crowding phenomena. Amblyopias can discriminate smaller visual acuity symbols when presented singly. Suppose here, this E is there. So if you show in this Snellen's chart, you will not be able to identify this E. But that E, if you show separately like this, you will be easily able to identify that one. That is known as crowding phenomena, which is seen in amblyopia. Okay. And then, so what is the treatment for amblyopia? So I told you the eye is lazy. So when do you develop amblyopia? Only if the eye is not seeing, you get amblyopia. Suppose there is some cataract. So that because of cataract, the eye doesn't mature properly. The neurons and all didn't mature properly, and there is amblyopia. So you operated for a cataract. After removing of cataract, the vision is not improving. Then the age of the child is less than 6 years, suppose. So till the age of 6 years, you have got the time for visual maturation. So what you do is you start occlusion of the sound eye. So suppose my right eye has got a cataract from birth. By the age of 6 months, I got operated for cataract in the right eye. Suppose you think. After cataract, my vision is not improving to the desired extent. So then what I do is I occlude the sound eye. Suppose this eye has got a 6/6 visual acuity and this eye has got little less vision. So after cataract surgery, what I do is I occlude this normal eye. Suppose this is my normal eye. I occlude it for some time. So I'll try to use this eye completely, which one has been operated for cataract, so that the eye will see more and it will try to improve it. It will try to develop, mature its visual function. So treatment of amblyopia is occlusion. So what is this occlusion? Suppose there is a child at the age of 2 years, you did a cataract surgery for him in the right eye. After cataract surgery, his vision is not improving fully. His left eye is totally normal and with 6/6 vision acuity. Then what is your aim? You have to improve the vision in the right eye. So to improve the vision in the right eye, what you do is you patch this left eye, the normal eye, you occlude it, so that the patient will be using only his right eye. So the more he's using that particular eye, the abnormal eye, there is more chances that his visual function will mature and it will develop to the full extent. So what you have to do is initially you have to do any squint surgery, you have to correct any refractive errors. So there are any media opacities like any cornea opacities or cataract. So first you have to treat that condition, either cataract surgery or refractive spectacle prescription or squint. First you have to treat the condition. After treating that condition, you will occlude the sound eye. So what is the schedule? How do you occlude? Up to 2 years, it is 2:1. So 2 days, the sound eye is occluded. So suppose the age of the child is 2 years. So for 2 years, what you do is, for 2 days, you occlude the sound eye. And for the rest of the days, you will be seeing with this normal eye. For 1 day, you will be occluding the abnormal eye. So similarly, for 3 years, 3:1. 3:1 means, suppose this eye is amblyopic. This eye is normal. So normal eye, I will occlude for 3 days. So for 3 days, only my abnormal eye will be functioning. For 1 day, my normal eye will be functioning. Because up to the 6 years of age, the vision will be maturing. So if you completely close this normal eye permanently, what will happen is there is chance that normal eye will also become blind or lose its visions. So we don't want that to happen. That's why if you are closing the normal eye for 2 days, you have to again reopen it for 1 day. So the patching is, suppose there's a 2-year-old child, his right eye is abnormal. So close the left eye, normal eye for 2 days. So after 2 days, you close this abnormal eye for 1 day. So that is how you do. For 3 years, it is 3:1, 4 years, 4:1. For 1 year, it is 1:1. So that is how you do amblyopia. Because if you don't patch the abnormal eye and you completely close, suppose the normal eye is closed totally and only abnormal eye is made to see, the abnormal eye vision will improve, but its normal eye vision may fall. That's why for 1 day, we have to make use of this normal eye. For the remaining days, we will use the abnormal eye. So that is the schedule for amblyopia treatment. And follow-up. It is said that a follow-up a week per year of life, it is very difficult to leave it. So for example, if there is a 1-year-old child, every 1 week you come for follow-up. Suppose there's a 2 years child, every 2 weeks you come for follow-up and you test his vision. Suppose there's a 3-year-old child, for every 3 weeks you see how much his vision has improved and does he need any spectacles, or is it that it is power change, this is glasses power change, all this you have to evaluate. So for 1-year child, every 1 week you will see, 2-year child every 2 weeks, 3-year child every 3 weeks. See, and even 1 week of occlusion develops amblyopia in critical period of life. So I told you from birth up to the age of 6 years, it is called critical period of life. So even for 1 week, you totally occlude the eye also, the normal eye may go into amblyopia. That's why at least for one day, we remove the normal eye and see. So even after recurrence is also common. Even after treatment, your vision comes to 6:6 also, there is chance that again amblyopia may recur. So the treatment is very cumbersome. So what time you do the treatment is till the visual acuity full develops, so no further vision improvement occurs for 3 months. So that is how you treat for amblyopia. And an abnormal retinal correspondence. So this is nothing but, suppose this is the fovea in the right eye, and this part should be the fovea of the left eye. Okay. So suppose this is an object you have to see. This is a fovea in the right eye, and this part should be actually the fovea in the left eye. So what happens is, both the fovea should be corresponding point. Actually, this center point, this fovea should see this object. This image of this object should fall on this fovea. And here at this point, so if a person, one doubt is there. Once I'll tell you this, let the class be over, then I'll tell this doubt. Okay. So suppose this point of intersection where it is, here one image should fall, and this point of intersection, the other images should fall. Only then it is a normal retinal correspondence. So both the fovea should correspond with each other. So that is normal retinal correspondence. So now suppose there is a squint in this eye, and this eye rotates some side, towards the right side or towards the left eye. This eye rotates. So then what will happen is, so this image is falling on the retina exactly here, but here the rays of light fall on some point which is not on the fovea. So actually, if both eyes are looking straight and there is no squint, the image should fall at the intersection of lines of both these places. So that is called normal retinal correspondence. But in case of squint, when there is a deviation of one eye, So in the normal eye, the image exactly falls on this intersection, but in the abnormal eye, it falls in some other place which is beside the fovea. So this is called abnormal retinal correspondence. So abnormal retinal correspondence is the fovea corresponds to an extrafoveal point to avoid diplopia and confusion. Because here why this abnormal retinal correspondence happens is, suppose the image of this object is falling on the fovea here, and the image of this object is falling somewhere here. So if this both are corresponding points, the image from this one and the image from this point will go to the brain, and the brain will see only a single image. Suppose if suppose the corresponding point is this part, if this part, what happens is this image will not be following here. Some other image will be coming and following here. So then the brain will get confused. So why this abnormal retinal correspondence develops is, only the same image falls on both the points, and only this point's impulses will be transmitted to the brain. Only then the brain can exactly interpret that they are the same images. Suppose if here this point is corresponding with this point, so this exact intersection of line is seeing one image, but this part of images will be seeing some other image. Then the brain will get confused as to which image it should process. So that is known as abnormal retinal correspondence. Suppose in place of this bulb, you have got a cow. So the image of the cow will be falling on here and this part. So the brain will interpret that there is a cow. Suppose here somewhere in the visual field, there is a buffalo. The buffalo's image is coming and falling on this point. So if this point is corresponding with the brain, then what will happen is the image of this cow and the image of this buffalo will fall on the retina, and that will be taken to the brain. So the brain will get confused as to which one to process. So that's why in case of squint, the body itself develops a protective phenomenon known as abnormal retinal correspondence. In abnormal retinal correspondence, what happens is this part of fovea of the normal eye gets correspondence with some other point, extrafoveal point, so that there is no confusion or no diplopia. That is abnormal retinal correspondence. Okay, that is again evaluated by Buxford test and Bagoni striated glass test. So this is diplopia. So diplopia means double vision. So double vision means, see, there is one water bottle. This water bottle you are seeing as two water bottles. Similarly, here one watch you are seeing as two watches. So this is known as diplopia. So why this diplopia is occurring? See, if suppose there is an object here, this red one is an object. So both eyes exactly on the fovea, this part is falling. That's why it is looking like a single object. But here there is a deviation. In deviation, what happens is, in this normal eye, this image will be falling on the fovea. So it will appear very bright. It will appear very bright, and exactly this image will be interpreted by the brain. But in the other eye, what happens is, this image is not exactly falling on the fovea. It is falling somewhere else. Okay. So in that case, what happens is, because of that abnormal retinal correspondence, this image location will be changed to some other point. I told you that there are x coordinate, y coordinate, and z coordinate. As per that Donder's law and Listing's plane and Listing's law, I told you there are x, y, and z coordinates. That is, when this eyeball is looking straight, so this image has got a particular x value, y value, and z value. So when this eye is looking at this side, its x value and y value and z value change. There is some different place in the space. So this image appears as if it is looking present at the exactly center of the graph. But this image of this A appears to be present somewhere else. That's why you get a double vision. So diplopia is nothing but double vision. In double vision, you will be seeing two images of the same object, which are located side by side. So why it happens is, when both eyes are looking straight, this image falls on the fovea, this image falls on the fovea, that impulse is sent to the brain. So there is no problem, everything is fine. But here what happens is, this image falls on the fovea of this eye. But here what happens is, on an extrafoveal point, this image will be falling. This image of the A will not fall on the fovea of this eye. It will be following some abnormal other point. That is, I told you, abnormal retinal correspondence. It will be following on some other particular eye. So this fovea of this right eye has one x, y, and z value. And this fovea has also got an x, y, and z value. So usually in the normal case, the x, y, and z values of this fovea of both the eyes will be same points. That's why you think that the object is located at a same part or same place in the space. But here what happens is, this image is falling on the fovea of this left eye. It will be present at the 0 point of this x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. But in this area, what happens is, the image is not falling on the fovea because of squint. The image is falling on some extrafoveal point. The extrafoveal point, x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis value will be changing. It will be somewhere around -1, -2. So that's why what happens is, the brain interprets as if one image is falling at the center and one image is falling somewhere to the side. That's why you get two images here. That is why diplopia occurs, so double vision occurs. Okay. So formation of image on two non-corresponding points of the retina. So each point of the retina has a particular orientation or particular value in space, particular x-axis, y-axis, z-axis value in space. For both the fovea, it is 0. So if the both eyes are straight, both images fall on the fovea, the x and y and z-axis value will be 0, and there will be only one image seen. But in case of squint, what happens when one eye is deviated? On one eye, it will be falling on the fovea, the x and y axis will be 0 point. But in the other eye, it will be falling on some non-extrafoveal point, that is a non-corresponding point. That non-corresponding point has a different position, x-axis and y-axis position. That's why you will be seeing that the image is slightly located to the right side or the left side. So that is known as diplopia or double vision. So what are the causes of diplopia is a question in your Viva. So what are the various causes of diplopia? Monocular diplopia. That is double vision. When you are seeing with one eye, you get double vision. That is could be due to high refractive error, incorrect placement of the spectacle. Suppose the spectacle is decentered, then you get double vision, or corneal opacities, cataracts. In cataract, you get polyopia, diplopia. In your previous classes, I might have told. Similarly, if the lens is dislocated or subluxated, extrapupillary openings like polyporia, macular diseases, retinal detachment, all these causes, you get monocular diplopia. That is double vision when you see with single eye. Similarly, binocular diplopia. So double vision, you see only when you see with both eyes. Suppose if you close one eye, you will be seeing only one object. When you open both eyes only, you will be seeing two images. It is seen in myasthenia gravis. It is usually seen in paralytic conditions. That is the extraocular muscle palsy or nerve palsy. Like in third nerve, sixth nerve paralysis and phorias, myasthenia gravis. This also causes muscle weakness, or some tumors in the orbit which are pushing the eyeball. Suppose there is a tumor, it pushes the eyeball here. So when the eyeball is pushed, when you are seeing with both eyes, you'll be seeing diplopia. And when you are seeing with one eye, you will be closed, you'll be seeing only one image. So these are the various causes: orbital wall fracture, internuclear ophthalmoplegia, and all these things. So to experience diplopia, suppose put your finger on one eye and you displace this one eye, you'll be seeing two images. So that is diplopia. So if you want to appreciate diplopia, so you put a finger on your eye and press this eye slowly and gently, you'll be seeing two images of the screen. So that is diplopia. So if there is any tumor pushing this eye, if there is a paralysis, this eye is not moving, then you get binocular diplopia. So descended spectacles and anisometropia also could be causes of binocular diplopia. So monocular diplopia causes they will be asking you in your Viva. So diplopia, just to remember, same object seen as two because of formation of image of two non-corresponding points of retina. And it could be binocular or monocular. Only this much you remember, it is enough. That concept is all not required for you. It's only I told you because for your understanding it will be easy. Types of diplopia: monocular and diplopia, and uncrossed and crossed. This is a little difficult to understand. So uncrossed diplopia is seen in esotropia. Crossed diplopia is seen in exotropia. Exotropia means outward deviation of the eyeball. Esotropia means inward deviation of eyeball. So in exotropia, there is X. X means cross. So crossed diplopia is seen in exotropia. Uncrossed diplopia is seen in esotropia. That much you remember. Next, what is confusion? Confusion is two different images falling on the corresponding points of the two retina. So here what happens is, suppose you see, here there is a parachute. So this eye is normal. Both the eyes are looking straight. The image of the parachute falls on this fovea and this fovea. So both are looking at a parachute, and the image of parachute is interpreted by the brain. So here there is no problem. Everything is good. But suppose there is a squint. This right eye is deviating inside. So what happens is, its fovea went away somewhere else. So now what happens? Suppose beside this parachute, an airplane is flying in the sky. So on the fovea of this right eye, the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis of this fovea will exactly correspond to the parachute. So this eye will be seeing the parachute. The fovea, the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis of this eye will be seeing an aeroplane. So now what happens is, the fovea of both the eyes, one eye will be seeing a parachute, the other eye will be seeing an aeroplane. So to the brain, what will happen is, one eye will send an impulse of parachute and the other eye will send an impulse of an aeroplane. So the brain will be confused as to what it is seeing. So confusion is confusion. So here brain is confused. We are not confused, and you also don't get confused. So confusion, what happens is, suppose there are two corresponding points. Suppose this is a fovea and this is a fovea. Both the fovea are corresponding points. One fovea sees a parachute. The other fovea sees an aeroplane in the sky, because the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis, the 0 points of this fovea correspond to the parachute. So this eye is seeing a parachute. The x, y, and z-axis ordinates of this eye are seeing an aeroplane in the sky. So this fovea receives a parachute and this fovea receives an aeroplane. So both these images will be taken to the brain, and the brain will get confused. So as to which image it has to process. So this is only a theoretical entity. Practically, confusion is very rare. Confusion we can only artificially introduce. That is, there is a machine called Synoptophore in which we can make two dissimilar images fall on the corresponding points of the retina. So usually if there is a squint, suppose there is a squint, this fovea corresponds to some other point here. So here the image of this parachute comes and falls somewhere here at where I'm pointing my mouse cursor. So what happens is, in squint, what happens is, there is an abnormal retinal correspondence, which is a protective mechanism. So here what happens is, in squint, suppose when this eye is deviated, this fovea forms a connection with an extrafoveal point located here, which has the same x, y, and z coordinates to this fovea. Suppose this fovea is looking at parachute, and this part here on the fovea is looking at this parachute. Then what happens is, this fovea develops correspondence with this extrafoveal point, which is known as abnormal retinal correspondence. That is the first one. So that's why practically in clinical practice, you never see confusion. Confusion is only a theoretical entity which can be practically induced. So now in this case, if you want to have confusion in the squint, suppose there is an abnormal retinal correspondence, and here this is the point which is corresponding to this x and y and z coordinates of this parachute. So here if you project an image of this airplane, then the brain will get confused. So that is about confusion. So don't worry too much about this. Just read about diplopia. Diplopia is monocular, binocular. Perception of a single image as two is called diplopia. Diplopia you learn. Confusion is when two corresponding points get the two different images. That is known as confusion. Because the xy axis, y axis, and z axis are different for both the points here. That's why it is happening like that. Hope you are clear with that. And few things about extraocular muscles. Most working muscle is the medial rectus, because always we have to converge. We are more used to do near work or reading. So medial rectus will be more into action, and the shortest muscle is the inferior oblique muscle. Okay, so that is about this one. I think the time is also up. Any doubts you have? It's all a little confusing. You just learn about amblyopia and diplopia and those Herring's law and Sherrington's law. That much is enough for you. The rest all I told you for concept purpose. So for your examination point of view, just this diplopia, types of diplopia they will ask, and then they will ask you about this amblyopia definition. They will ask amblyopia definition, diplopia definition, and this grades of binocular vision, stereopsis, fusion, and simultaneous perception. This one they will ask, and then this cardinal positions of gazes. Only that, and this Herring's law, Sherrington's law. That much you remember, it is enough. No need to go beyond that for your level. Okay, these doubts once let us see. Chart notes. Okay. If a person develops myopia of 3.75 for both eyes at 12 years. So the doubt is, if a person develops myopia of 3.75 minus 3.75 for both eyes at 12 years and uses spectacles, but suddenly stops for 6 months, what can happen to the eyes? Usually I told you the critical period of life is up to the age of 6 years. So from birth up to the age of 6 years only, the visual maturity will be developing. The latest study shows that, the latest amblyopia treatment study which has been undertaken recently, that shows that up to the age of 13 years, maximum visual acuity will be developed. So we can try this patching therapy, occlusion therapy, etc. for the age of 13 years. So what happens is, anything below 6 years, it is very important. Below 6 years, if you correct the refractive error, no problem. And below, you will not develop any amblyopia. Suppose below 6 years, you are emmetropic. So usually what happens is, at the age of 12 years, there is puberty. At the time of puberty, there will be growth spurt. When your body height is increasing, your eyeball length will increase, and then you will get myopia. So at that time, if you get glasses also, there is no problem. You don't develop any myopia, because up to the age of 6 years, you are normal. So your vision function is already good. By the age of 12 years, because of growth in eyeball, you develop myopia and you use glasses for them. So there is no amblyopia. So after 12 years, if you use spectacles for 6 months, and later on, if you stop, you won't develop any amblyopia because your visual function is good. But only thing is, you'll not be able to see properly. You'll get headache. That's it. You'll get headache. You will not be able to see what is written on the blackboard clearly. You can't read the boards on the buses and shops, etc. So you'll be facing a lot of problem in your personal life, and your education may go backward, and you may get a headache and a lot of strain because of that. Beyond that, nothing will happen. You won't develop any amblyopia. That's why always, if you have any spectacle error, always use glasses. If you are not so good like using glasses, you don't want to use glasses, go for a LASIK surgery at the age of 18 years. So you won't develop any amblyopia, nothing to worry. Only thing you'll develop is, you'll develop headache, stress and strain, and you'll not be able to see everything clearly. That's it. And any more doubts? Someone raised a hand. Okay. I think it's over. So we'll close for today. Hope your doubt is clear. So don't worry, you won't develop any amblyopia. Only you'll not be able to see properly. And if possible, you'll get a headache and stress and strain and symptoms of asthenopia. Nothing more than that. Okay. Okay, then we'll call it a day today. Next classes we'll see. It is all little confusing topic. So read well. Again, we'll see in tomorrow's class. We'll cover the next things. Okay. We'll take 2 more classes. No more doubts, no? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Done.
Oscar.